I want to talk about this just explosive story that came out of New York City involving the New York Times and a meeting, a staff meeting 1 week ago today. Turns out someone was recording it and released a transcript of it and is now public. Understanding what the New York Times executive editor said to his own staff as they talked about their coverage of Donald Trump over the last year and what they intend to do going forward. So first of all, this was actually just an amazing thing. This became public. This is, again, is the New York Times executive editor Beckett meeting with his entire staff a week ago today. Number one, he acknowledged that the New York Times had pretty much been, in his words, just to summarize what they did over the last 2 years, they had been obsessed and driven with the idea that they were going to Donald Trump removed because of the alleged Russia-Trump collusion, which now everyone has seen what did not happen, was a made-up story. So here this guy talking to his own newsroom, he was just really, it was a very hard story, and he celebrates they won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Turns out the story wasn't true. If you ever thought for a moment that the New York Times is still a journalistic institution, this should disabuse you of that notion forever. They are not about journalism. They are about propaganda. They are about defining for America what they want you to think. So that was the first thing. Very, very open acknowledgement by this guy, Beckett. This is what we did. We tried very hard to force the American public to believe that Trump was illegitimately elected because of Trump-Russia collusion. This executive editor was devastated by the fact, as it turned out, that in fact, his words, I don't give you his exact words. He said, "We built our newsroom to cover one story, and we did it truly well," in reference to the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. And then he said, now we have to regroup, shift resources and emphasis to take on a different story. So they're not journalists. They were just driven by this effort to shape the American public opinion about Trump having been elected allegedly illicitly. But now that that's fallen apart, their next plan, you might think they might say, we'd like to go back to honest journalism, so we're going to actually commit to try to cover both sides of the story, both sides of the aisle, try to cover Donald Trump in a fair and accurate way. But that's not what they chose to do. The announcement in this meeting, again, the transcript release, you can read the transcript. It's on our website, americacanwetalk.org. You can go to the links there and go down homepage under show, list of links, and you can actually read the entire lengthy 18-page transcript. Why I want to draw to your attention, though, is because the decision by the New York Times was not to say, maybe we should try journalistic integrity for a while. Their decision was to try to focus on the argument they make that Donald Trump is a racist. And so they want to expand discussion about racism in this country. They want to flood the airways, cover every story they conceivably cover, all from the perspective of alleging that President Trump is a racist, that anyone who voted for him is a racist, even though they may not know it, that his viewpoints and policies are all racist. They are driven to stuff this racism narrative down the throats of the American people. This is really, really important to understand. New York Times. Now, I'm going to guess a lot of my listeners don't read the New York Times, but it's still considered in many of the elite leftist circles kind of the pinnacle that maybe along with the Washington Post, but the two are considered to be the height of journalism, the dream job out of journalism school, or the dream job of eventually get hired by the New York Times. And these people are telling you, and in fact, I'm going to talk more in the next segment about this meeting, because it isn't just this announcement that was made relating to focusing on Donald Trump and racism. It was expanded into something called the 1619 Project, which I'll describe for you, but also had the back and forth between these staff members at this meeting a week ago today, New York Times, and this executive editor, Beckett, kind of back and forth, essentially, talking about how we're going to cover racism. And the main question they got from many of the people who raised their hand is that I'd like to ask a question, would in some way or other, can't we say racism more? Can't we accuse him of racism more often? Can't we attack him as a racist in every conceivable story? And folks, I want to get down to something we're going to really cover more in the next segment. But this is, if it's not obvious to you, an insidious effort to divide America, to plant seeds of doubt and distrust among various groups in America, to encourage people to see their fellow neighbors, fellow Americans as potentially racist, as oppressors. It is designed to deeply harm our culture and our country. It is designed to divide America. These people sitting there in that New York Times meeting with their editor were not particularly, they weren't really apologetic. They weren't really, no one, at least I read in the transcript, said, well, maybe we should reconsider our preconceived notion that President Trump is a racist. I mean, why do we keep saying that? Look at all these great things he's doing. Nobody suggested that. The entire effort of all the conversation, at least that you could read in this transcript, was about, can't we push the Trump is a racist narrative more? I want to close out the first five by saying this. In 2020, our presidential election is going to be impossibly important. It's impossible to overstate the importance of the 2020 election. The mainstream media, led by the New York Times, many of the Democrat elites in the country, pretty much all of the candidates for the presidency on the American Democrat side, going on their time 24/7 trying to plant the seed of doubt and just plant a seed in the minds of the American people that the country is a deeply racist country. Racism is seething below the surface everywhere, that people of color should be worried. And we need to meet that. We need to challenge that. People who love this country, people who love the rule of law, who love the policies and the ideas that Donald Trump stands for. We need to be standing up for our country, recognizing the leftist campaign headed into 2020 is flat out pure assault on the American people, on you, on me, and anyone who supports President Trump's agenda. So close out the first five by saying I want to talk more about this next, but it's really important to understand this racism issue is going to be a huge issue. This allegation of racism, discussion of racism, it is incumbent on us to speak up in response to it and to deny. I'm Debbie Georgatos, my first five on America Can We Talk?